Hi everybody, and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. A strong warning before we begin. Our main story references a physical assault that resulted in pregnancy, so if that topic makes you feel uncomfortable, I suggest you skip the story. Now let's begin. This post is from the subreddit Mothers-in-Law from Hell, and it's by user ThrowawayAK77. My mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter and told my husband she isn't his. I'm so angry, I don't know what to do now that I have confirmation. She is dead to me. I just found out my daughter isn't my husband's and I'm devastated. A couple of months ago, my mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter because she didn't believe she was my husband's. Background. My 45 female husband, 48 male, and I have been together for 25 years and have 3 kids, female 8, male 15, and female 17. My husband and I had a lot of trouble conceiving our daughter. We went through several years with no luck and had seen a fertility doctor who had prescribed some medication to help with ovulation. We couldn't afford IVF, so we were going to try this last thing and then look into adoption. Well, long story short, I was sexually assaulted during a burglary while my husband was out with his brother. It was right when I was to be ovulating. At the hospital, I took emergency contraception even though I knew it would undo all the hard work, medication, and mean we wouldn't be able to have a baby of our own, but I couldn't risk getting pregnant that way. Well, after a few months, I've been feeling off, sick, and down. I figured I was just depressed after the assault, and I hadn't been eating, but I soon found out I was pregnant. We were so excited until I went to my appointment and found out I was 15 weeks instead of the 5 or 6 weeks I thought I was. I had been having really irregular spotting and bleeding since the emergency contraception, so I didn't even imagine I was that far along. My husband and I were devastated because that meant there was so much uncertainty surrounding paternity. We had our ultrasound, and as soon as we saw the baby on the screen, I knew I couldn't terminate my pregnancy, and my husband didn't want to either. We talked and went back and forth about adoption and if the baby didn't end up being his or what we would do. He said he didn't care about paternity, we just wouldn't find out. We decided to wait until our child was older to tell them, and they could decide if they wanted to find out themselves. I will also note at this point, my case was unsolved but had been linked to others at the time. A few years ago, my attacker was caught and a year ago finally sentenced. At the hearing, I spoke and my daughter and son knew about it but didn't go into details. They knew I was attacked, but only knew it was before they were born. Anyways, last Christmas, my mother-in-law bought my daughter and only my daughter a 23andMe for Christmas. I thought it was extremely weird, but didn't think too much of it. Thinking back, I don't know why I didn't see it for what it was. My daughter was equally confused and asked if I wanted to do it instead. I'm adopted. I said sure and just gave my daughter an Amazon gift card for the price of the test. My daughter brought it to my attention that my mother-in-law has been overly critical of my daughter in the last few months, commenting on her differences, saying things like, "I wonder where those eyes came from, hair, height." She even said to my daughter, "I wonder why you're so skinny." My daughter looks exactly like me, the same eye color, same hair color, and texture, but she is quite a bit taller than me. I'm 5'8" and she is 6 feet tall. I'm on the heavier side, so is my husband, and my daughter is extremely thin, but she is also an athlete. I've never had any reason to believe from looks alone that she is not my husband's daughter. After my daughter brought up how my mother-in-law was acting to me, I spoke with her and she said, "Oh, she's just being sensitive." This was a couple of months ago. Then a couple of nights ago, my mother-in-law invited my husband and me out for dinner and told us to leave the kids at home because she had something important to discuss with us. We did. We went to a restaurant and we were eating when my mother-in-law hands me and my husband 2 separate envelopes. My husband and I both look in the envelopes and they are DNA comparison results. I asked my mother-in-law what it was and she said, "The proof that you're the garbage I always knew you were." I was extremely confused. I asked whose DNA she compared and as I said that, I just knew. She said she tested my husband's and my daughter's. My husband looked at me and he looked so hurt and lost. I'll never get that image out of my head as long as I live. I called her a heartless "see you next Tuesday" and my husband and I left. I blocked her number from mine and my kids' phones, but figured my husband needed to make that decision on his own. He told me last night that my mother-in-law called him and he stopped by after work at her house. She was telling my husband she's known for a while and suspected for a very long time and that she wasn't sure how to approach the topic with him. My husband asked how she knew that, and she said she overheard my brother-in-law talking to his wife and heard our daughter may not be his. My mother-in-law took that to mean that I cheated, so she did a DNA test. The thing is that last year, around the hearing, my husband got drunk and ended up mentioning the hearing in some details to my brother-in-law. Apparently, that night while sleeping, he said, "I couldn't protect her, and what if she's not mine?" My husband was extremely drunk and did not remember doing this. My mother-in-law does not know that I was sexually assaulted, but she does know that there was a break-in and I was attacked. She kept trying to convince my husband to leave me. My husband told her that what she did was unforgivable and that he was going to cut her off. He's inconsolable. He's so upset he told his mother to F off and then told her that my attack was actually a sexual assault and that's who our daughter's biological father is. It still makes me sick to say that. She tried to apologize, but my husband told her he can't forgive her and not to contact any of us. I told everyone my mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter and we were done with her. I have 7 siblings. 5 think I'm in the right, and the other 2, along with my brother-in-law, can't believe mother-in-law did that, but understand why, because she didn't have the entire story and assumed I wasn't being truthful to my husband. But even if I wasn't, I can't imagine being a parent so concerned with my child's relationship that I would go to those lengths to meddle. Wow, OP, what you went through. Horrible situation. And then your mother-in-law doing this thing behind your back? Also horrible. I mean, she told your husband she didn't know how to tell him about it or how to talk about it, but when she did make a decision, she thought the best route was to do it in a public place and handing you 2 envelopes. Again, I'm really sorry, OP, that you've had to go through, well, you and your family have had to go through all of this. And I do believe that you've made the right choice by going no contact. There's something in the phrase, the proof that you're the garbage I always knew you were, that kinda hints that this is the type of relationship you don't want to have. And what do you guys think about this whole situation? What would you do if you were in OP's shoes? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. 3Ring Crap Show says, cutting her off fully and permanently is the only response appropriate for such a nasty, meddling piece of work. Anyone who takes her side can join her. She wanted to destroy your beautiful family for something that was none of her damn business. There could have been any number of reasons for such a result. Donor sperm, IVF mix-up, etc. She's also been treating your daughter differently based on her perceived paternity, and that's not on. She's never going to view her as family. I'd suggest counseling to support you and your husband, and depending on what she knows, for your daughter if she needs it. So sorry you find yourself in this situation. Hugs to all of you. Kessel Thum says, oh my god, I am so sorry she disgustingly violated your family like that. I don't understand why your siblings and brother-in-law think she was understandable in doing that. Nobody outside your family is owed knowing every private thing that goes on in it. And going that far in meddling with an adult-child's relationship, holy crap, no. Virtual hugs, I'm sorry for what you and your family are going through right now, and hope the best for your family going forward. SmithCJ5664 says, I am so sorry you were attacked, and now mother-in-law has attacked you again. No excuse for this intrusive attack on your family's privacy. I admire how you and dear husband have handled everything. Please keep your children away from her. She's already treating your daughter differently and sounds like she could be very cruel to her. No one needs to be put through that. As mother-in-law tells everyone she can about this, block and end relationships with anyone who attempts to say she was only protecting her son or anything like that. Her only goal was to expose you and it backfired. Now she has to play victim. Additional information from OP's comments. I have spoken with my daughter. I told her I have something important about my past to talk with her about, and we are going to meet with our therapist later today. Side note, I'm in therapy and so is my husband, and we have been since this all started. My kids are also in therapy. I think it's wonderful and everyone should go. I make them go about every 3 months and they can go more often if they like. No questions asked. They both usually go once a month or every other month since they started puberty. Anyway, I'm just very upset I had this conversation with her so early. It's not what I wanted. Also, I don't know how she got the DNA compared, but it wouldn't be that hard to do since we are at my in-laws' house a lot. We live an hour away and they live in a big city, so if we go drinking or are out later and don't want to drive home, we stay there. We have clothes, toothbrushes, toiletries, hairbrushes, etc. I know my daughter would have told me had my mother-in-law asked her to do a swab, but I guess we'll get clarity when we have this discussion. And since my mother-in-law probably did the test through random DNA samples at her house, we are going to redo the test to be sure the results are correct regardless. Thank you all for your support and kind words, it really does mean a lot. Well, the community agrees, the mother-in-law just absolutely sucks. And OP was also able to give us a little bit more context as to everything that is going on and her assumptions as to how it happened. So now, let's move on to the update to see how this story ends, but of course it's that time where I tell you about another one of my playlists that only has videos with updates on them, like this one. Now, let's move on to the update. First of all, thank you for all the support, and a big F off to all the creeps and a-holes. To answer the most common questions, yes, we are no contact with my mother-in-law. I haven't talked to her since that dinner and my husband hasn't spoken to her since a couple of days after that. She knows I was sexually assaulted and attempted to apologize to my husband when he last spoke to her, but he basically told her to F off and that he couldn't forgive her. I had a good relationship with her up until this point, or so I thought. We hung out and did stuff together. I was really hurt by what she said to me at dinner when I asked what the envelope was. That it was, "Prove that you're the trash I always knew you were." Also, my answers and descriptions of what happened to me are intentionally vague to keep my family and myself safe. It's enough to say that he is in prison for life without parole and I am not the only person he did this to. There are very few articles about this trial because it was a closed trial, and although none of the victims interviewed are mentioned by name, they do use initials. There is also a slew of other charges he had brought against him as well. Some people want to know why or how I could have kept a baby considering the uncertainty of who the father could be, and the answer is that even if I had known definitely that he was the father, my decision probably wouldn't have been different. She is as much a part of me biologically speaking as she is his, and after seeing her move around, I didn't desire to terminate, although it would have been nearly impossible for me to get one anyway because of where I live. Although she was conceived in violence, she was raised in love, understanding, and acceptance. She is much more mine and my husband's. My attacker had no influence or part in her life and never will. I know DNA doesn't mean anything in the sense of who she is, but that doesn't diminish the devastation and anger I feel knowing he is responsible for any part of her. I'm honestly not sure why my husband and I were so blindsided, but I feel like you can convince yourself of anything given the right circumstances. Initially, we did feel she wasn't likely his because of the year we went without conceiving, but when I got pregnant with my son pretty soon after my daughter, I convinced myself that not only was it a possibility, it was the only likely scenario. It's also not lost on me that the decision to keep her isn't something many people agree with apparently according to this post, but I know I made the right decision because my daughter is the most amazing girl and I couldn't imagine my life without her. She's doing well and her relationship with me and my husband hasn't changed at all. If anything, her relationship with my husband is much better. She tries to spend more time with him and they have many shared interests. My daughter said she isn't upset I didn't tell her. She's upset she had to find out when she wasn't truly ready, but she's happy I was able to share such a vulnerable and horrible event with her. My son also knows the specifics and my youngest only knows her sister has a different dad. Extended from OP's comments. Regarding the uncertainty my husband and I had about paternity is because we had sex the same day of my assault and the day prior. However, we did think initially that she might not be his because we hadn't gotten pregnant after so many years. But then my son was conceived before my daughter turned 1. Also, it didn't matter to me who the father was. I knew I wouldn't treat her any differently based on her parentage. I was going to keep the baby regardless. I ultimately left the decision to find out about it to my husband because his paternal DNA was in question. He felt it was better for him not to know. About my mother-in-law, as I said, we've been no contact with her since this happened, and my husband can't forgive her. Her reasoning for testing my daughter was that she doesn't think she looks like my husband, which I admit she doesn't, but she looks identical to me as a teenager and looks enough like her siblings that it's obvious they're related. But my 15 male and 8 female look very similar and more like my husband. And my husband and I have been in therapy together on and off since this happened 18 years ago. I have put myself in her shoes, but I cannot fathom putting my curiosity over my child's well-being and 25-year relationship. I understand being suspicious and wanting to bring it up, but she didn't. She violated our trust by sneaking around, either stealing our personal items or our trash, and then DNA testing it. She didn't approach me or my husband about her suspicions. Not only that, but she decided it would be a good idea to try to publicly humiliate me by outing me as a cheater in a busy restaurant. The only thing I have to be thankful for is that she had the thought to say not to bring our children, because if she would have pulled this with them present, I would probably be in jail. We are doing well. The initial incident was a couple of months ago, and my husband was hurt that 1, his own mother would try to hurt his wife of 25 years, 2, that she'd do it so publicly, and 3, that he was so blindsided. He said he always knew it was a possibility, but there was never anything that made him think she wasn't his. Also, if he had planned to do the DNA test with our knowledge, he would have had time to prepare, and we just didn't because of my mother-in-law. In any case, I retested her because my husband didn't willingly provide a sample, and neither did my daughter, so we didn't know how she got the DNA. We did a recheck and confirmed the results. Well, OP, again, I'm so sorry that you went through everything that you did and that your daughter had to find out like this. But the silver lining is that now that your family does know the truth, all of you can work together in moving forward. Now you guys get to have more support. So thank you for sharing, OP, and all the best in the future. Take care. Now with that, I definitely need a mood booster post, so let's finish this video with that. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user DaftBoyDim. Company saves cost by taking away company cars. About 6 years ago, I worked for a power supply company in the UK. I worked in a small project team that coordinated all the company's major infrastructure projects, and the role required to travel 2 meetings all over the country. We'd average around 800 miles a week in company miles over that year, depending on the time of year and location of projects, etc. Someone in the finance department had reviewed our expense claims and calculated that over 1 quarter we'd not covered the required number of company miles to meet the company's policy on company cars for that 1 quarter without looking at any other data. We lost our company car entitlement, and the company told us we had to return the company fleet at the end of their leases. Malicious Compliance activated. As we were project engineers, we had a very particular set of skills for knowing how to follow rules to the letter and how to do so in a manner that benefited the company or project or individuals. Usually, if it benefited the company, it benefited all involved. This was not one of those occasions. We pay benefit in kind tax on our company cars in the UK. The rules around this changes when the government feels like it. My team had all carefully chosen cars to be zero cost to ourselves by choosing cars that were below the allowance of £300 per month, so the remaining allowance covered the tax obligation. We'd all be screwed by the benefit in kind tax changes that year, and we're now paying tax. So, for starters, we reviewed the company car policy and found the company had no way of stopping us from handing our cars back with immediate effect, whilst the company was still responsible for the leases. So we all made arrangements for personal cars and handed our keys over at the next team meeting. We also reviewed the company travel policy. We started using hire cars and trains for traveling. Trains and hire cars in the UK are not cheap, as none of us were willing to use our personal cars and claim the 50p or 50 cents per mile. Usually, we'd work a long day and book a bit of overtime in lieu to drive to and from meetings without staying over, as we would prefer to be at home even if it meant getting home late. That stopped with immediate effect. We'd only work the mandated 7.5-hour day, then stop, book into a hotel and take full advantage of the £25 food and drink allowance for dinner. Then work from home the following day, as we'd been away from home the previous day, as per the policy. After about 8 weeks, we were called into a meeting with our line manager and department manager about our expenses. Our expenses for the first month after the cars had been returned were more than they were the previous 12 months combined. Our line manager agreed that our expenses were in line with the policy, otherwise he wouldn't have signed them off. The department manager told us we were getting company cars back and he expected the expenses to return to previous levels. We declined the offer of company cars and let management know we'd be adhering to the travel policy in the letter. Well, your company cars were taken away from you, so you just had to do it another way. Good for you for taking initiative, OP. Thank you for sharing. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out, so here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later, and also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.